Hi everybody, this is Angel Arts, and this is Sinlyn Trials vlog number 5. This particular session, we continued on through the woods, and we got a good amount of combat here. And I mentioned this a little bit briefly during the session in that this is, I'm not used to having campaigns where we get so much combat in one session, and not necessarily just one session, but in the same in-game day, because the resource management becomes a lot more important, and I think it's tough on the spellcasters, especially casters like me who don't have a lot of combative skills all that much, so that when you get into combat, 3 times in a row, especially when it's front-loaded with a mini-boss. It felt like, we were going up against an apprentice, and I felt like I needed to use virtually all of my resources, my inspiration, bardic inspiration, and cunning words and all that stuff, just so that we can remain afloat to this girl, because Hem is ridiculous. Hem is insane. I like the character a lot. I think that Devin did a great job of designing her ability. She's a very interesting character, not only in combat but also out of combat. The fact that she is mute, which is really interesting considering how I had just picked up Detect Thoughts with Quinn, and that seemed a little timely considering how we were coming up against a character that normally can't communicate through regular speech. So not that Detect Thoughts really helped very much, although I think based on the thoughts that Quinn was getting from her, she was definitely getting the, angsty adolescent vibe. Angst. And I think that Quinn definitely her patience was being tried with her, if you noticed. She's, I guess as a mom, I think that she saw her as this really moody girl that they're trying to talk her down, and she's just not gonna have it. Like, she's super stubborn, and Quinn definitely has pegged her as her current nemesis. And I think that she did a pretty good job of not backing down and not letting this girl, who's very confident, rightfully so, because she's definitely quite formidable. The 3 of us, were able to, survive the fight, but she was definitely opening a can and taking names. Back to the resource management. It's just one of those things that, especially with as low-level casters, I think we just have to struggle with, and Devin just has to keep a close eye on that because, I think it was very apparent when we got inside, and Quinn unfortunately didn't have very much she could do. Like the Vicious Mockery, which is pretty much her go-to ability when she's run out of everything else. When she's got nothing else to do, she's going to use Vicious Mockery, and when Vicious Mockery isn't effective on the enemies, then she's going to have to pull out the rapier, and just the situation that we were in, it was tough for her to really get in there. And it's not necessarily useful or better for her to get into melee, because sometimes she becomes less than useful, as I said, like when her rapier ended up getting cracked. But I suppose I did assist in damaging it, although it would have been really nice if I thought it was ridiculously hilarious, as you've seen, that had I not cracked my rapier, I would have made the killing blow, ironically, on that last golem, and it just, like, the dice just wasn't in my favor. So, given those situations, I try to find some creative ways to participate in combat. It's a little bit hard because I was thinking of some pretty creative ways with the ink. The ink is super fun. Like, I love the ability to try to think out of the box and try to solve a problem, not only out of combat, but in combat. I thought it was super cool, the whole pen is mightier than the sword thing, that she was able to, slice that cord with her pen when after Sarun was trying to hack it off with his sword or whatever weapon he's using. It's just really interesting to see like the many different uses that we can get out of the ink before it completely runs out. And at that point, I'm going to be a very sad panda because then I definitely will have far less things that I can do during combat at that point. But I think that at least for the next couple of levels, I just have to keep a close eye my uh, on my spells more so than before, because in the past I am notorious for hoarding my abilities and hoarding my spells. Like even when we get into a fight where it would be really useful if I used some of my more powerful abilities, I always in my head say to myself, no, like but I might need it later, and then the end of the day comes and it's time for us to go to sleep, and it's like, like I could have used that ability, and it would have been really cool if I had used that ability. So during this campaign, I was trying to make it a point to be better about that, because in the past, that was a problem for me. Like I was bad with that. So with this campaign, I was like, okay, if it seems like it's a good time for me to use an ability, I'm going to use the ability, and I have. But now, that's starting to bite me in the butt. So it's annoying how that balancing act has to work with me. And I mean, that's just the reality of the game and the reality of playing with different DMs who have different paces. They tell the story in a completely different pace. My form of storytelling, it tends to be extremely story heavy and very role play heavy. So quite often we'll go through an entire session without any combat at all. And so, even when we do have combat, there's normally just one combat and that's it. And I'm aware that that makes things a lot less, the whole aspect of resource management becomes extremely diminished. I'm perfectly aware of that. But it's just the style. It's just my DMing style. It's just how I like to tell a story. And when I like to tell the story, combat is not an afterthought. Combat is put in when it makes sense. Like I don't put combat just for the sake of having combat. And I'm not saying at all that that's what Devin's doing, because I think that all of the combat that Devin has put in front of us makes perfect sense with what's happening in the situation. But it's just interesting to be able to see those different types of DM styles, and as a player, how you have to adapt. And I think that all of us are adapting, not only us as players, but Devin is trying to adapt as well, just so that he can give us the most um, the most fulfilling experience, which means that he challenges us just enough so that it's, like I said, fulfilling but not frustrating. I mean, you can frustrate us quite a bit, but there's always a point where you have to get the balance between frustrating your players too much, where it becomes ridiculously not fun, versus frustrating us enough just so that it becomes even more fulfilling when we overcome those challenges. Speaking of overcoming challenges, the final part of the campaign, or the session rather, was intense. I liked how that was designed. I like that we had to, all work together to be able to help Tabak, and I love how it was very clear that there were some major consequences that would happen based on how successful we were at, attacking and destroying one of the Goliath brothers. And, there were consequences with how we explored the mine itself, and even consequences based on the choices that we made when we were in our dream the session before. So I really like that Devin gave us a lot of those chances to try to get an advantage on this session through the dreams. I just feel that even the paintings that we looked at were pretty vague. So it wasn't always necessarily, I don't know, I feel like it might not have been obvious enough to figure out exactly what we needed to do and what we needed to find. Like there were references to things like the gate, um, and then came the final battle. And I mean, we figured, since the DM was pointing things out to us, like, oh yeah, there's this box, and when you look inside, there's these wires that are detached, and yeah, you go up this ladder, and there's this slot that looks like you can put the glue crystal in, and there's this control panel. He made sure that and this unicorn looking thing. So he was very good about pointing all of those things out, and I think he was just trying to help us, because things can be a little vague. It's a bit challenging when I don't have a visual map. I'm a very visual person, and Devin, it's not his fault at all. I mean, he does a fantastic job of trying to speak to us, the theater of the mind, speak to us the things that we are seeing and experiencing. But for someone like me, who's a very visual person, it's hard for me to really picture just what things look like just based on words. And I think that's what made a lot of the combats, especially near the end, very confusing. Is just I just had a hard time. He would say north, south, east, west, and I mean, I know my directions. I know where north, south, east, and west are. But if I don't draw the map and just like start sketching it, which I might start doing, but if once I start doing that, then I'm afraid that I will miss something else, because while I'm drawing things, I guess my multitasking skills are not as up to snuff, and so if I'm busy like sketching a map, and other things are happening around me, or Devin is moving on to the next thing, I can easily miss something. So that's one thing as me as a player that I have to be aware of, and that I have to, just do my best with and struggle through, trying to get a picture of what's happening in front of me and where everything is and where we are in relation to where everything is. I think that Devin was very good to us, especially considering how the dice rolls were just ridiculous, and the fact that he kept rolling a 4, he kept rolling a d4, and he kept rolling 4s to zap me with the electricity, me being the one with the lowest hit points, going to the thing that continually zaps us with electricity, and Saroon being the one who's not necessarily the most athletic between us is the one that's pulling onto the lever, and then it just was such a big mess. But at least we did manage to get rid of one of the Goliaths, and I think we definitely earned those 2 levels. I'm still mad that I listened to Devin, because my gut feeling was, seriously, honestly, I was ready to go to those wires and just use the ink to draw the wires to connect them together. Devin was like, no, you can just put them together with your hands, and I was like, well, the DM's telling me to use my hands, so I'm going to use my hands. And while that has helped, listening to your DM has helped in the past, sometimes you kind of have to stick with your guns and just do what you were going to do and not necessarily listen to the DMs. But but then again, had I not listened to Devin, then I would not have redrawn that window and door to go to interact with those 2 golems, because then we wouldn't have ultimately gotten the sphere thing that would have been a requirement in that room to stop the genocide of poor Tabak. So yeah, it's I mean, yeah, like sometimes you definitely should listen to your DM, and other times you shouldn't. It's a lot of this. Overall, I definitely enjoyed the session a lot. It definitely, again, the intensity and the adrenaline during the combat, not only with Ham, but also during the whole puzzle thing at the end. I like combat that's more of a puzzle, because I think that you got to switch things up sometimes when you have a boss fight, that it's not always about taking somebody's hit points down to 0. Sometimes you have to actually use your head. The last thing I wanted to talk about is I'm actually pretty surprised, or not surprised, but I think I'm pleasantly surprised, I guess, that Saroon really wanted to try to give these unrepentants a chance to become repentant, a chance to become redeemed. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised that Blaze and Quinn actually were open to the idea instead of just shooting it down. I mean, when we were fighting him, Blaze himself was trying to you know, not outright kill him. He was trying to talk her out of it, or trying to knock her up a bit and maybe get her to surrender, but Hem wasn't having it. And I find that really cool, and I find that really realistic too, because I think that Blaze respects Sarun a lot. He understands Sarun. He understands why it's important for him to try to give these unrepentants a chance. Quinn is sort of like in the middle. Like she definitely thinks that people should be given the opportunity to be redeemed, but they have to want to be redeemed. And Hem and these Goliaths didn't seem like they had any desire to be repentant. And if that's the case, then, you know, Quinn has no problem taking them down, has no problem taking them out. So she can go, she really can go either way. And again, I think part of the reason why she was originally trying to give Hem a chance was because she also respected Sarun, and then she got all angsty on them, and the, you know, the mother, you know, reacting to the rebellious teenager just got the better of Quinn, and she was just like she was not having it at all. I'm definitely very interested to see what will happen when the two of them run into each other again, because I'm sure that we have definitely not seen the last of him, especially since Devin seemed to be extremely insistent on having her escape from us, not once, but twice. So we definitely are going to see her again. Anyway, so thank you guys for watching, and definitely am looking forward to the next session. Until then, love yourselves, love each other.